Louis Vuitton, Dior, Saint Laurent, Gucci. These are just some of the brands belonging to major luxury conglomerates LVMH and Kering. The luxury business's $397 billion market capitalization is mostly attributable to these multinational companies who dominate the worldwide market. These corporations and a few independent businesses create the most sought-after and exclusive luxury goods, including apparel, accessories, jewelry, and timepieces. We are talking about a major player here. If you wanted a little more background, Bernard Arnault, CEO of LVMH, with an estimated net worth of $200 billion, first appeared on Forbes' list of billionaires in 1997. The business magnate even passed tech tycoon Elon Musk for the wealthiest person alive in April, if only for a while. But who are these massive corporations' customers? Who is responsible for the enormous $397 billion valuation? Are those at the very top? My aristocracy. This is surprising. No. The industry relies on the support of the upper middle class. In a July interview with the Financial Times, LVMH CFO Jean-Jacques Guyani said, "We don't sell most Louis Vuitton products to rich people. It is to people who have money and want to indulge themselves. Now we must ask, why aren't the super rich and the upper class participating in this sector with the same enthusiasm as the middle class? Why aren't they treating themselves to those delicious Louis Vuitton or Saint Laurent treats? We must understand why the top 1% aren't spending on luxury goods." But before we answer those questions, let's define what a luxury product actually is.
I always wonder what the process is, like creating these pieces. It almost looks like the universe, you know?
There is a life inside.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. There are a lot of different ways to define luxury goods. Still, generally speaking, they must meet 3 conditions. They must be very expensive, making them difficult to get. They must be meticulously made, and they must be able to serve as a symbol of wealth or, more precisely, distinction. These services are available in some form or another from all reputable luxury brands. However, a complicated hierarchical network is still at work. Thus, let's start from the ground up by classifying them into different financial groupings. The Major League consists of the most prominent and well-known luxury properties. These are the ones that most people imagine when they think of luxury. Chanel, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and Dior are all examples of houses in this category. These names in consumer goods have yearly sales of $10 billion or more, or are well on their way to doing so. Without a doubt, Louis Vuitton, owned by LVMH, stands out among these brands. This year, it achieved a new milestone, becoming the first luxury fashion house to earn $20 billion in sales. As dominant players in their fields, these labels usually set the tone for what's popular on the catwalk and in the streets. They aren't content to make high-end products. They want to revolutionize the creative process. Now, we move on to the second set of high-end companies, called the minor league. The vast majority of premium labels fall into this group, although even within them, there is a range of styles and budgets. While some labels have widespread recognition, others remain in the exclusive sphere of fashionistas and the well-heeled. Annual revenue for this category's most famous and lucrative companies ranges from $2 to $5 billion. Celine, Saint Laurent, Armani, and Balenciaga are among the brands that fall under this category. Like the Major League, this minor league section has businesses keen on pushing the envelope and expressing their creative side via clothing. One key difference is that certain labels are more concerned with preserving particular dress requirements to preserve their historic identity. Brands that aren't household names, but are major players in the fashion world, make up the other half of the minor league. These labels usually bring in less than $2 billion annually and cater to a certain subset of the luxury market. This category includes Brunello Cucinelli, Lu, Bottega Veneta, and Loro Piana. Although Bottega Veneta and Lo are more often considered creative labels than conventional luxury houses, most of these companies are part of the quiet luxury category. This will be crucial later on. Regardless, the businesses continue to be linked to the strict silent luxury trend because they provide items that reflect the idea of this style. Both businesses seem to be planning to join the other half of the minor leagues soon, with the goals of becoming more well-known outside of their niches and making over $2 billion in sales. Celine exemplifies this sort of transition. The French house rose from a $500 million niche business to a worldwide powerhouse with over $2 billion in sales annually under Hedi Slimani's leadership. Return to the original question, why aren't the 1% purchasing into luxury? Let's start by outlining a rough understanding of the categories. That's not quite right. You may recall that I compared the classification of luxury goods to a web. Now we get to the meat of the matter. The vast majority of the wealthy in the West, and by rich, I mean the upper class, choose not to splurge on major league labels when shopping for high-end items. Rather, they invest in niche companies directly or indirectly related to the concept of understated luxury, with a handful of notable outliers that we'll discuss later. A new design trend called quiet luxury has emerged to question the conventional wisdom about how the well-off dress. Everything about it is subtle and muted. For example, although there are many variations of quiet luxury, commonalities across the board include a muted or monochromatic color scheme, understated or non-existent branding, and an absence of flashy patterns. Certainly, you may be daring and experimental while still adhering to the style. This is particularly true about the accessories, embellishments, and regal color palettes like gold and silver. However, at its core, the style gives ordinary clothing a little edge so people can notice. If you know details. Also, the 1% doesn't care about this difference. Symbolic value. The foundation of a high-end product is the concept of sign value, coined by French philosopher Jean Baudrillard. It explores the meaning of an object about its personal, cultural, and social surroundings. Sign value is the engine that propels the luxury goods business. Its present existence and prosperity are directly attributable to it. Another reason companies in the minor league could have symbolic importance on par with or even higher than major league brands is sign value. This is true even if minor league brands bring in far less money each year than major league brands. Exclusivity, legacy, and craftsmanship are some aspects and features that get ingrained in the brand's identity and contribute to this phenomenon. So the 1% adopt a sign value that tells others they aren't new money. That is, those who have only lately become wealthy by choosing to dress more subtly. The premise is that newly minted currency is more likely to flaunt its wealth via ostentatious displays of material possessions. On the other hand, the 1% usually choose to play it low-key. They have an air of understated elegance that befits their illustrious family fortune. The cultural narrative that old money represents tradition, elegance, and social status is reflected in this contrast. Contrarily, new money is linked to a flashier and more immediate manifestation of affluence. Although the LVMH family is seen as new money because their fortune does not extend beyond generations, they are also known for their minimalist style. Members of the family run almost every major luxury company globally. This brings up two main points. The first is that the dynamics of old money and new money are more of a mindset than a set of hard and fast rules. The second is that these divisions are not wholly applicable to the present day. People termed new money, such as very wealthy families, are increasingly acting like old money. Returning to the original point, the 1% do not like having their belongings adorned with Louis Vuitton monograms or Gucci patterns. They purposefully shun flashy displays of wealth to project an image of being the embodiment of money. As I said before, it's not uncommon for the businesses that manage to get the attention of the 1% to wind up in the minor league. Brunello Cucinelli, Loro Piana, Ralph Lauren, Celine. These businesses are perfect examples of understated elegance. See, most super rich deliberately shun the major fashion designers and labels, so it's not only the super rich who carry the industry heavyweights. The upper middle class is doing all that labor. How can we be sure about this? Unlike most firms facing perilous financial underperformance and a real prospect of a permanent shutdown, the fashion sector flourished throughout the pandemic. The fashion and leather goods divisions of LVMH had a substantial 18% surge in revenue during the last quarter of 2020. The gem in Kering's crown, Gucci, exceeded pre-pandemic sales levels in 2021 with revenues of $11.2 billion, an increase of 31.2% from 2020. Richemont, another luxury multinational, had a third quarter of 2021 revenues of more than $6 billion, an improvement of 38% above the 2019 Christmas period before the pandemic. A hitherto unseen boom was sweeping the sector. Who was spearheading this boom? The upper middle class. With the extra money they had saved throughout the epidemic, a large section of the upper middle class treated themselves to some luxury goods. There was this palpable fear that the end of the world was imminent. Because nobody knows the future, many people think enjoying the here and now is crucial. We had to make the most of it daily, even in quarantine with few people. And what came out of this live each day as it happens mentality? A lot of people began to spend lavishly. What our excellent buddy Jean-Jacques Goyani mentioned before is something you should remember. Major league companies mostly target the upper middle class, not the ultra-wealthy upper classes, when they produce luxury things. I should mention that major league labels have couture and tailor-made items built to order for the 1%, but they mostly target the upper middle class and the nouveau riche with most of their goods. How much do they cost? Yeah, I guess so. However, can you easily get to them? Sure thing. To reach that $10 billion milestone, selling to more than just the top 1% would be necessary. The 1% is often slang for the 0.1% these days, so keep that in mind. A very, very tiny demography of individuals in the globe. Do you believe that ambitious brands and corporations would want to rely on this demographic exclusively or even mostly to reach their $10 billion targets? Absolute nonsense. It's precarious. However, what about the middle class? You can depend on them completely. About 350 million individuals fell into the middle class group, according to estimates. A larger number than the whole US population. The people buying those $3,000 purses are middle-class men and women. Those in the middle class shell out cash for the newest designs from Fashion Week. They can treat themselves every once in a while without jeopardizing their overall financial stability. They are the very essence of the contemporary fashion industry. Where do middle-class people shop when they treat themselves to something fancy? Of all, the major league. Furthermore, it is logical if you give it some thought. Sign value is very important to most individuals, even if they don't say it out loud. Very few individuals buy expensive things without thinking about the meaning they represent to others. Just pretend you can't afford to treat yourself to expensive luxuries regularly. On the contrary, you frequently treat yourself to a small number of high-priced luxury items. Is it more probable that you choose a product with a prominent price tag or something more inconspicuous, like a logo-less purse, that only a certain subset of the population would ever see? The more obvious bag will likely appeal to you since it is simpler to justify, and you may have been socialized to like it. We must determine how to make the most of this commodity people want. In my opinion, the ability to arouse desire is the essence of luxury, and you brought this up in your inquiry regarding our line of work. Since the affluent no longer value exclusivity as highly, they are less likely to purchase major league premium labels. On the contrary, they like subtler labels. But for multinational corporations, it makes no difference. Regardless, they see a gain in both market value and revenue, and they often have additional brands that serve both the middle class and the 1%. That was life amid the epidemic, however. Throughout that tremendous expansion, when the sector consistently achieved new heights. Now, however, what to do? Well, things aren't looking good anymore. The fashion business has been ill-prepared for life in almost every way after the epidemic. The business is still worth billions, but has slowed considerably in the previous year. LVMH, for example, had organic sales growth of less than expected at 9%, and was surpassed as Europe's most valuable firm by pharmaceutical Novo Nordisk. Despite experts' best predictions of a 6.2% decline, major league brands like Gucci had organic sales plummet 7% in the third quarter of 2023. The company even brought on Sabato De Sarno as creative director, although some have said he isn't as risk-taking with Gucci as Alessandro Michele was. The new reality has also challenged creative minor league firms like Saint Laurent and Balenciaga, which have allegedly seen sales underperformance this year. Therefore, what gives? What caused an abrupt slowdown in an industry expanding rapidly throughout the pandemic? Not complicated. While the middle class cuts spending, the top 1% keeps spending. Most middle-class families have already started saving more money and reducing their spending on non-essentials to afford to cut down on luxury shopping. They are putting off big purchases like automobiles and houses and putting more money into savings in response to the growing cost of living and inflation worldwide. China, the United States, and Europe are all huge marketplaces for luxury goods, and according to Bloomberg, this behavior change is happening worldwide. Major league brands that depend on middle-class purchasing have witnessed reductions and underperformances, and this pattern explains why. You may have guessed it by now, but most companies that aren't reporting underperformance are actually from the second group in the minor league. The names Brunello Cucinelli, Ermenegildo Zegna, Loro Piana, and Lou pop up. Since the epidemic ended, none of these brands has failed. On the contrary, a few of them even announced all-time high profits. In the second quarter of 2023, for instance, Brunello Cucinelli saw a good 27.5% boost in sales, which led to the company upgrading its revenue projection for the third time last October. The billionaire population is unconcerned about inflation and living expenses. Thus, these brands can surf the money wave while their bigger brother brands struggle to traverse the seas. Some major league outliers are doing very well in the post-pandemic environment, and it's not just the minor league brands that are popular with the upper crust. Hermès, a French luxury brand, is one such exception. The house has achieved incredible financial success, earning $12 billion in income last year, despite undeniably being a major league participant. Unlike other major league fashion labels, they maintain a certain amount of selectiveness, giving them symbolic value. The level of sign value is typically seen primarily with specialized minor league brands. The once quiet affluence of the past doesn't seem so peaceful now. Quiet luxury, old money, stealth wealth, and similar topics have been trending recently on social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram. People of different ages and backgrounds are trying to copy the trend because of this rise. It might be the tiny subset of the middle class that sometimes splurges on niche labels, or the majority of the population that chooses quick fashion knockoffs to imitate the 1%. Do you recall that I said that a few minor league labels, like Brunello Cucinelli, were setting sales records? This is probably because certain middle-class individuals who aren't afraid to spend and take risks are starting to like this new sign value. The question that keeps popping into your head is whether or not the ultra-rich will eventually show some opposition to this approach. What if they forego minimalism in favor of something more dramatic in response to the quiet style losing its demeanor? How much longer we wait is anybody's guess.